Why do financial crises keep happening? Intro hook. Why do financial crises keep happening? Why is it that right after a brutal market crash, we rush straight into the next bubble like nothing ever happened? As it turns out, the ultimate flaw isn't greed, and it isn't the banks. It's a systemic glitch in our own memories. Let's return to the acorn forest to uncover a terrifying truth about human nature. Hook. 5 years after losing his house, Squirrel returned to Chestnut Hills. He froze. The streets were full again. Construction cranes filled the sky. House prices were rising. Animals were celebrating. And on a giant billboard, he read the words that made his stomach drop. This time is different. For a moment, Squirrel felt like he had traveled back in time. ACT 1. Didn't we learn anything? Squirrel walked through the neighborhood in disbelief. A young fox proudly showed off 3 houses he had purchased using borrowed acorns. A young rabbit was buying land because prices always go up. Visual infographic. The camera pans to a giant outdoor screen of Squirrel TV. On the screen, an animated line graph appears. It shows a jagged red line shooting straight up. Labels appear next to the peak. New highs. Unstoppable growth. The screen flashes bright green as numbers spin wildly. Squirrel TV was once again celebrating rising prices. Experts were back. Predictions were back. Optimism was back. Squirrel couldn't believe it. Had everyone forgotten the Great Acorn Bubble? He began asking older animals. Bear remembered. Old fox remembered. Old beaver remembered. They all remembered the pain, the bankruptcies, the panic, the rescue. Then Squirrel asked the younger animals. Most of them had never experienced the crash. To them, it was just an old story. ACT 2. The return of confidence. As prices continued rising, memories continued fading. Banks became more confident. Borrowers became more confident. Investors became more confident. Squirrel noticed something terrifying. The exact same phrases were returning. Prices always go up. This time is different. You can't lose. He had heard these words before. Years ago, right before everything collapsed. For the first time since losing his house, Squirrel became afraid again. Not of losing money, but of watching everyone repeat the same mistake. ACT 3. The visit to Acorn Capital. Squirrel returned to Acorn Capital. The old fund manager was still there. Older, slower, but still drinking tea. Squirrel asked the question that had haunted him for years. Why does this keep happening? The old squirrel smiled. Because every generation believes it is smarter than the previous one. Squirrel frowned. But everyone remembers the crisis. The old squirrel shook his head. No, the people who suffered remember. The people who didn't suffer inherit stories. He looked out the window. Visual infographic. The old fund manager rolls out a large, dusty parchment map onto the table. It transforms into a clean, stylized economic infographic showing a perfect sine wave. As the old squirrel speaks, the camera tracks along the wave, highlighting 4 distinct phases with minimal, sharp labels. Phase 1. Pain, crisis, the bottom of the wave, illustrated with a broken acorn symbol. Phase 2. Oblivion, forgetting, the wave starts climbing slowly. Phase 3. Euphoria, Overconfidence, the peak of the wave, labeled, this time is different. Phase 4. Collapse, the steep drop back down. And stories are much easier to ignore than pain, the old squirrel said, pointing right at the peak of the wave. Twist. Squirrel sat silently, staring at the endless loop on the map. Then he asked the question he didn't want to ask. So we'll never learn? The old squirrel smiled sadly. No, we learn. He paused. We just forget. The words hit Squirrel harder than any market crash. The problem wasn't greed. The problem wasn't banks. The problem wasn't investors. The problem was memory. ACT 4. Watching history return. One afternoon, Squirrel walked past a real estate office. Inside stood a young squirrel. Excited. Nervous. Hopeful. The loan officer pushed a contract across the table. Trust me, he said. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Squirrel froze. He had heard those exact words before. Years ago, when he signed his own loan papers. For a moment, he considered walking inside. He considered warning the young squirrel. He considered telling him everything. The bubble, the crash, the rescue, the years of regret. But then he stopped, because he suddenly realized something painful. If someone had warned him all those years ago, he probably wouldn't have listened either. Ending. As the sun disappeared behind the forest, Squirrel remembered something the chief owl had once told him. Audio effect. The background music fades away completely. A deep echo fills the air as Chief Owl's voice returns from Squirrel's memory. We are not choosing between good and bad. We are choosing between bad and worse. Squirrel stood silently on the hill. For years, he thought financial crises happened because people were greedy. Now he understood something far more frightening. Financial crises happen because people forget. And forgetting is part of being human. In the distance, cheering erupted across Chestnut Hills. House prices had reached another record. Then Squirrel saw someone leaving the real estate office. It was the young Squirrel. The contract was still in his paw. He looked excited, hopeful, proud, exactly the way Squirrel had looked years ago. The young Squirrel paused for a moment and stared toward the glowing city. Then he smiled, and walked into the lights. Visual. The camera shows a match cut or a fading silhouette effect, blurring the young Squirrel's face into a reflection of Squirrel's own younger self from 5 years ago, holding his first house contract. Squirrel watched him disappear. For a brief second, he saw himself. The same dream, the same confidence, the same belief that this time would be different. He closed his eyes, then smiled sadly, because for the first time in his life, he understood something that frightened him more than any market crash. There would be another bubble. And one day, there would be another Squirrel. And someday after that, there would be another Squirrel standing on this same hill, watching another young dreamer walk into another bubble, and wondering how it happened again. The end. Lesson. Financial crises often repeat not because people fail to learn from history, but because the people who remember the pain are eventually replaced by people who only remember the stories.